And this platform that we're building right now is a tool to kind of like conceptualize and visualize this eco-village before we build it. So in the last few sessions, I've done kind of a more conceptual introduction to like what's leading to the thought process of wanting to build an eco-village. Why do we think building eco-village is really important? And and last session we did a bit of a technical dive into Unity. So today we're gonna do a bit more of that, where we'll play with Unity, but also play with a bunch of other related software if needed. And we will dive into that today. Let me just start by sharing my screen. And also just a heads up, this will be more of a technical session of what we want to do. So it wouldn't be like it wouldn't be like a lot of talking, or it wouldn't be it will be a lot of talking, but it wouldn't be like as, I guess, like creative sometimes, because sometimes it will get quite technical, but that is the nature of game development. As I said this many times, and a lot of game developers definitely share the same thoughts with me, where the game development is really a grind, and it's a grind that you have to constantly go at it, and you have to be really persistent and not afraid when things crash or not working well. Really have the perseverance to push through and figure out the challenge that you face. So today we're gonna just have a bit more of those kind of the technical deep dive into like the process of creating a video game. Before I get into the technical side, I want to also just talk a bit about how I got started with game development and how I see this whole thing as a progress. But basically, I never really had any professional training like on the technical side when it comes to game development. In college, I picked up this major called design technology, where it's relating to using technology to create design and creative work. And I found technology to be just like a really fascinating form of art. I see it as like a really pure form of artwork. Like I really see programming and, whether in hardware or software sense, as like a very elaborate, beautiful art piece. And that's kind of my introduction to programming. But I never really had like computer science major training. And then that's something that I really noticed to be a difference when I started to get into the gaming industry and get into like the industry of AR, VR, like virtual asset creation. A lot of times when I have an idea on what I want to create, and I just like don't really know how to build the software infrastructure for it, because it just kind of it took me a while to realize how much of a deep science and kind of like thinking method it really is in the real realm of computer science. So like I definitely don't think that I am a professional computer science person, but I basically just learned everything that I know how to do through YouTube and other form of tutorials. But what's really fascinated me is that it's actually possible for you to learn everything you need to learn from just YouTube and Googling. That's why like Googling has become such a part of my learning journey. Like everything I don't know, I just need to figure out the right way to Google. And at some point you realize you actually know enough to create everything you want to do in order to everything you want to create, basically. And so it kind of works the same way creating this game, where not everything I do so far is like something that I already know or I'm super familiar with. Like certain things that I know concept of, but I like sometimes forget about the syntax. Sometimes I just know this is the feature I want to do, but I don't really know what's it called, or like how do you actually program that into an interaction. So a lot of that sometimes I would just like need to Google or Reddit and be like, hey, I want to make an interaction that does A and does B. And then a lot of times you find out that all other people are actually trying to do the same thing, and there's readily available answers on the forum, on Stack Overflow, and you read through it, copy some code, change some things, and then that's actually, in my opinion, a best way to learn, because you are actually learning by doing things, and you're learning on how to learn. So with this mentality, and I'm extremely thankful for like all the material open source educational content out there, so that we can, like whenever we are creating something from scratch, there's always a massive network of internet where you can go and find out the resources that you need. And just with learning in this sort of way, I've kind of became less and less afraid of learning new things. Like now, like if I get tossed task or like a new software I need to pick up, just knowing that there is community, there are always communities that are trying to learn and share their knowledge out there, and knowing that, like as long as if you just give it enough dedication and just sit down in front of a computer and really just read the documentation, look up things, you will be able to learn a lot of things. Maybe not all the majority of the things you can actually learn it yourself. So that's something that I would really like to share with this community out here. If you're thinking about picking up new skills, if you're thinking about like getting into either programming or like art or music or any sort of like creative and technical career, just don't be afraid, because a lot of people have done that already and shared their insights and results online. Just be patient with yourself and go slow but persistent at what you want to do, and at some point you actually realize that like even without spending like hundreds of hours inside any technique, you actually can pick up something relatively easy in today's context. So yeah, that's just something I wanted to share before we get started with the technical deep dive. Just gonna see if there's any comments out of Google, but this is yes, Google's awesome. Have you found any game developer Discord DAOs? I remember I was trying to join the blockchain game developer network, and I their payment, but it just kept failing because gas fee wasn't enough, and I set it as the highest gas, and it still didn't work. I don't know. I think it was Bitcoin, and I just like didn't get the gas right. And at some point, I was like, actually don't want to join this, don't need to join this. But I think there's developer DAO that is a pretty well-known, really good developers. There's also Metacartel, but I don't think any of it is game development focused. And in terms of game development, I actually have game developer DAO, like blockchain community in general, because I think the best game developers out there are not all in the space yet. Maybe they will be, maybe they won't, but I think if you want to find the best talent anywhere, I think we need to look like inside the crypto space and also outside the crypto space. A lot of the really talented game developers out there, they're very focused on making games, and they're very deeply rooted in the gaming industry. You find them at GDC, you find them at like at game conventions and things like that. So that's kind of how I found my game development community, is through like local media, and through a game developer conference, and through like demonstrating game at game shows, and then you get into network with other people that's like demonstrating their games and meeting a lot of talented people that way. And because DAOs and blockchain, DAOs and Web3 is still kind of relatively, a lot of the DAO culture is super related to just like people flipping tokens and then just like selling NFTs, and that's slightly a different community than people that are just like spending 12 hours a day doing engineering work. So I think that like the pool is slightly limited in the blockchain space. I definitely think there's going to be a lot of talented people in this space, and it really depends on like how much more creative work we can add to the space, and the more creative work we can add to the space, able to attract a lot more talented people. Not saying that there is no talented people in the space, but I just think that there is a lot more that's actually out there that maybe we can't really find inside this space yet. And I wonder if that could be one step further than Google Reddit as getting answer support. Definitely having a community is like number one, the best way to like learn, by having really talented people working alongside you. Then a lot of times, I do think that there's like when I work with people that's super talented, sometimes I just get kind of lazy where there's I could have spent time figuring it out myself, but I'm like, oh, this genius is sitting right next to me. Let me just ask them this question, and they'll be really nice to help me. But I think like that, nice to have that, but also without that, you kind of just like learn how to fish yourself, So I think it's beneficial both ways. And great reminder not to take these things for granted. Okay, and before we dive into it, I do want to share just as we're talking about game developer communities, I remember, let me see if this website is still up. No, okay. I remember back in New York, there was a developer community that became a co-living hub. I think in today's mindset, I think we can definitely consider them as a DAO without blockchain, where it's a community of people with a shared interest that met together and decided to rent this office in Brooklyn, and more their friends that are all game developers just joined them to share the space, and eventually I think they were able to monopolize a whole building in Dumbo in Brooklyn, this abandoned warehouse, and turned it into a game developer hub where a lot of game developers that knew each other had an office there, and then everyone's working on something really cool alongside. Games actually got really far on Steam. They were on the higher ranking side, and then I remember I wanted to I was pretty involved with that community, but I had to leave to LA for a job. So in the end, I lost in touch with that community. But it was super cool knowing kind of how things work. Everyone had a shared Discord. People asked questions. People kind of were very connected. Attracted even outside from New York. So now that was way before DAOs was a thing. And from my perspective, way before I knew about what that is, but in today's context, that something like that could have been a game development of some sort. I was trying to remember the website, but I don't think I do. Okay, a bit of a digress. Let's get today's session, which is continue of some live coding with Unity. So before we get started, I want to just do a bit of a description of what I did in between this session and last session. Let me just remove this really ugly thing on the screen, and I totally don't remember where I put, because my scene is a bit of a mess. Yeah, I definitely want to clarify that this is not the most optimal way of going through a semi-complex game idea. I'm kind of treating this project as a hackathon because of this residency, because this residency is gonna in around a week, and usually you can't really just make a start to finish game, not even a demo in part of the time, because at least you should spend a few weeks to a month just conceptualizing and planning your engineering structure and thinking about where everything belongs and where everything should go. I can kind of want to share an example of an engineering structure that I did for another game. But usually before you even get into the coding part, if you're making something that's semi-complex, you should really list out the flow chart of where things belong. So this is kind of what I did for a game. It was a music related game. I typed out of all the manager script, object script, and then kind of the hierarchy of different scripts, and then how they talk to each other, how what are some of the functions they call to get data from each other, and then really list out, and also list out all the elements, and then what are these elements, what are some of the functions that we're calling from them, figuring out the hierarchy. So this graph, even though it doesn't look super, I spent a lot of time finalizing it, because sometimes you really want to set up the structure to be super optimal. So in the future, way later, after you've already built this infrastructure, it's kind of like building a building. You really have to have a floor plan, and then you lay the brick by the floor plan. Because if you don't do that, if you're just oh, I have this interaction, I'm just gonna build this today, you can do that with just patch together code. Next day you want to build another interaction on top of this, and interaction on top of this. That's kind of building a build out the bricks side by side, just kind of tossing the bricks so it works. And as you go really high, the building is gonna start crumble, and weird gonna start coming and you're gonna just be swamped in tears and blood and be really upset with yourself setting up a really good structure. So that's like the ideal way to build any game of certain complexity to not drive yourself crazy later on. We have to spend some time laying out the structure, and I was really trying to do that with this project. So yeah, on Figma, I was really trying to do like the engineering structure of the Agartha project, laying out what I need. But I think I have to admit I really overestimated how much I could have gotten done within a month, because like as I was laying out these structures, pulling together the chart of like permaculture, laying out all the objects and what's needed, the elements, the interactions, and I was like, as I was making, I was actually super stressed because I was imagining kind of to finish all of this and give a working demo by the end of this residency. And at some point, I just realized how absolutely ridiculous that is, because there's no way you complete something this complex within like a month. Like something like this, you probably need to spend just a month thinking structure, and then like 2-3 months actually building everything. So like I realized that this is very overambitious to be done in a month. Not saying I want to do it. I definitely want to continue working on this. In terms of thinking about what I want to deliver as a result for this residency, I really have to just like not follow what I here and just make something work right away, so that people can see what's actually going on in my mind and see it being reflected on the screen as a experience. So that's why I was like, okay, let's just build a demo. So I started treating this project hackathon, where like I only have a week. Let's see what can be built in a week. Let's not think about like super complex engineering structure first. Let's just make things work, and then after we make a demo, make work, we can kind of take a step back, take a breather, and restructure things, and then make it more complete. And so just want to out, I'm kind of just like going through some of the functions that we want to build and see how we can make it work. So before that, I'm gonna show you guys. So last session we did a bit of a menu interaction where we click on a button and then it changes different menus. Nothing crazy, and then we added a little bit of animation, which is really satisfying. So in between that session and today, I added a bit more. Well, I actually removed a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things that we don't need, and only left what I think it's necessary. And let me just reduce the definition so that it lag like crazy. So big update this week. I've added a first-person control. Just actually added a first-person control. So when you move around, you can actually village, and I think if you walk off edge, you're gonna fall. Yeah, see, this is the edge, and then these grass are flying on top. So definitely not that great. I definitely need to change that. But yeah, so I added that you can walk around. It's really laggy because I'm playing in ACV on screen recording and live streaming at the same time, so bear with me. The frame rate is probably like less than 10, but it feels really immersive. It feels like you're actually inside this village, which is quite nice. And you see the houses, you see that's our beautiful catcher. Imagine if we can have an actual rain catcher. You can see these really satisfying solar panel. I don't know if you can like get up there. I think you can get up there. So this part is fun now. Like it feels a lot more interactive, and to do like this kind of first person, it's actually super easy in Unity. There's like ready-made asset that you can just bind to different keys and just make it work in a few minutes. So this is really nice. And so in my mind, I was thinking, what are the readily like the super like minimal demo we can make just within this time of the residency? Not thinking about anything crazy, I was not just keep it super simple. And what I think could be really satisfying to see is like sort of a world viewer with like info data, kind of like augmented information when you're exploring the world. So as you're working, so you can see there's a little cross at the center of the screen, and that's our kind of like pointer. So the goal is that everything that you point is going to get some data on the screen. So if you point this into like a rock, it will say like nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, which I misspelled, it exists on this rock. So actually, that's actually not the rock. So I've decided to, you know, like it would be really cool if you can look at look at some patch of soil, and it tells you like how much nitrogen, NPK, basically. So what I did is that these really ugly blocks you see, they're placeholders content, and I basically, let me pause. So I basically created these blocks. You can consider them as like the blocks that people use in Minecraft, where each block on the soil will have its own soil data. So if you click on this block, it kind of just like has a collider to it, and then it has this soil sample, and it will give you the soil name, soil like number 240, and the amount of nitrogen, the amount of potassium, the amount of phosphorus in it. And then this data will be fetched by our player data with this raycasting detection function, where like aim every time when the aim is shooting a ray from the direction of your viewpoint, so your camera. As you're walking around this world, you're kind of shooting a ray towards the world that you see, and every time that when that ray hits certain object with certain data attached on them, for example, this soil object has this data, and then it will recognize that and be like, and then take the data from the object it hits and then render that onto the screen. So that's what we did so far for this soil. For today's session, I want to just more of that and kind of maybe add that for the house, maybe add that for plants. And we want to see if we can use the same method to actually plant things into the soil. So let's say if we detect the soil, and then we can pull up, it's also something I've added, so we click on this menu, we find the food section, and on the left side, it's not super visible. I've added these food icons, and I've only added like menu, and it's just been so satisfying to scroll them. So I've been just like scrolling them for a while to satisfy myself, fulfill my ego, and be like, look, you accomplished something. But it's actually really addicting. But what we want to make today is that once you select one of these food, maybe the best way is for food to show up, like model to show up in front of you, and then you can plant that like on top of the soil. And then you can only plant that on top of certain soil. Like you wouldn't be able to plant that on a house because that doesn't make any sense. So that is the goal today, and let's see if we can, how far we can get within like around half an hour. So I'm gonna pause. My computer might because it has been doing that, because it's a very like it's a very heavy, has a lot of grass, but I love these grass too much to remove them, so I'm just gonna let them stay because they look just so beautiful. And before we get started, let me see if there's any questions. Okay, crazy, not enough hours. My mind is definitely not a machine, it's just a machine. Big fan of the hackathon approach. The hills are alive, the sound of music. Yes, the feeling we're trying to get. In interactive instruments to play to nature, maybe the flowers will grow faster, easy, no? That actually, I would love that. Maybe, but also definitely in real life. Imagine if you have an eco-village where you grow flowers all the time. Wouldn't the food taste more like, you know, better? Believe it. I like that it's not showing on a menu. Well, it's called a menu, so. Okay, so first step, so these are all my soil samples, and I'm gonna just like turn off the measure. Render is like the content that's showing its shadow, so we don't really want these to render because we don't really want to see these ugly blocks, but we want to keep the collider, and that's where all the detection of shape happens. So when you're looking at it, it knows that it's colliding because of because of that. So they a few goals in mind. One of them is to make more material to be able to react the same way as the soil. So like you look at things and it will tell you what it is. And another thing is to actually plant the plants inside the soil. We'll try to do the planting today because I think that's a bit more exciting, And then before we get into think out how it's gonna work. So basically, as we mentioned, we already have a script that does this raycasting. Raycasting is basically you shoot a ray from the direction of your viewport, and then it interacts with objects. The ray interacts with the object. So in this way, if we want to plant an object, whenever you look at it, whenever you're shooting a ray, and you will get the kind of the interaction point of the object and your ray. So like if you get that position, like it's a position of the ray and the soil, and then you apply any object into that position. Like you instantiate a new object because you can't use the same object. We need to add a new object, right? So that's gonna be logic. But before that, we also need to think about like this menu system. Like we need to know which object we want to plant, right? We can't just because there's basically four different that we prepared. Even though in real life there's gonna be a lot more. There's probably gonna be like 100 something plants, and then you need to make a search bar to actually look for the plants. But for the sake of the demo, we are only using 4 plants, which is more than enough. These 4 plants, I have their 3D models here. I'm actually really happy with how they turned out. This lettuce doesn't look that great. Well, it looks fine, but it just doesn't look like it fit this environment because everything in this environment is really minimal and 2D. So we are gonna use this lettuce where like I redo the texture where it just more cartoon. And we have a carrot, and we have a corn, and we have some mushrooms. So like we'll have the option to plant all of these, and we're gonna make their scale relative. And okay, and yeah. And also before we get into it, we as prefab objects. So objects are kind of from the object in the scene where you see the scene, it's referred as game object. They're like object that's being kind of interacted with in the game. Where prefab, it's more like the file of this object, but this file include a lot of the data. Like it's not just a 3D file; it's a game object file that has like different names, have different parameters, scripts attached to it. So once you save things as a prefab, you can instantiate it as many times as you want with code. So for example, if I want to be able to plant this carrot anywhere I click, I really need to save this as a prefab. And then in code, every time when I want to plant, I would just call if I'm doing this thing, plant a carrot, like instantiate a carrot. So so in order to instantiate, we need to save things as prefab. In order to save things as prefab, I'm gonna create some objects. So let me just break instance. So this is like all of our vegetables, and actually I think I have these vegetables saved somewhere else. I think I have player capsule inside the main camera. So yeah, inside the veggie container. Okay. So I have this here, and I think the size looks fine. Like the corn looks like they should be in the size. The mushroom maybe a bit too big. No, like this is too big. And lettuce looks fine, and carrots looks a bit too big. And so right here, I want to create a game object, and basically use these as a container. So we're gonna have container object. For the reason it's easier to adjust its size and it's easier to adjust its pivot instead of doing it with code. Because in code, we want to instantiate every object at the same size and at the same position and everything. But then, like, as you can see, like, if we instantiate the carrot at this position and instantiate like the mushroom at this pivot, sometimes the pivot might not be like the ideal pivot that we want, even though right now I think I prepared it pretty well. So basically, if this model has a pivot at the bottom and then we instantiate on the ground, it will look like the whole carrot is sticking out, which is not accurate because carrots grow. You know, it's more like a root vegetable. So in order to do that, we're gonna put our model inside like a custom object. Custom object is we're gonna turn on this like little indicator in scene, make it like this is like the pivot of the game object that we're trying to create, and we can kind of position our carrot to a place. Grab carrot like here and use global coordinate. So we're gonna put it like kind of exactly here. So when we instantiate an object, this will be the position that we instantiate. Be like, you know, planting like this. So we're gonna call this. I think we should save it as a prefab just as it is, but we might need to attach a script to it. Can't really think that far right now, so I'm just gonna save it. If we need to add things later, we'll resave it. So we saved carrot. It's giving me a code, an arrow for no reason. We saved it. Delete this, and same concept. We're gonna do the same for all these other. Oh, before that, we need to also make sure that the size is correct. So this carrot scale is 1, and then that's pretty much correct. And we want the lettuce. So I created a for lettuce. I'm gonna change the scale to 1. The lettuce in here, and this is where the game object pivot is, and probably put this a bit lower and call this lettuce. And same for the mushroom. Mushroom, and put this right here. Yeah, also I need to change the size. So oyster mushroom needs to be 1, 1, 1, so it needs to be all the same size. So the point is that like the container object of mushroom has, why is the size 3? That doesn't make any sense. I just changed it. Maybe I changed it wrong. So all the container object needs to have size. Okay. Let's figure it out. I need to select on the container object and size 1 and put your mesh object inside so that mesh can, you know, I can change the mesh I want, but then its container would have the same size. So in code, you're spawning it, you're setting the size of its container, then it doesn't matter how you change the size of the child, it will be fine. And this is the last one where we do the corn. Corn is super tall, so we're gonna same thing, and then remember to change its rotation to set it to 0. And corn is right here, so we're gonna put corn inside here. And yeah, I think corn can be even like I tall corn are they're like as tall as, probably taller than me. Okay, so now we have all these things created. Sweet, and now what we do is that our camera, which is probably controlled by the player script. So in our player script, which is something that I wrote a while ago, every time when we do the raycast, so every time when we hit something, and then if that is soil, so if the stuff that we're raycasting on has the soil sample script attached to it, that means it's good season to plant. That means like it's advisable to plant things. So let me just think about how that works. So before that, maybe what we need to do, number 1, is write the plant function. So we'll do void plant things. Plants. Plant. And what we need to know as we're planting the plant, we need to first know which plant are we planting. So we need to kind of have the game object of the plant object. And we also want to know what's the position of the planting. So we need to vector 3 and position. So in this function, we're not the side of this function right now. In this function, we just do 2 things. We need to know which plant are we planting, and then what's the position of that plant. So, and then that will make our lives a lot easier. This function will instantiate a game object and set the position of that game object to be the planting position, and that's. And I think I know the syntax of instantiate. Just wanted to make sure that I don't do anything wrong. We're gonna go into the Unity official documentation, instantiating prefabs at runtime, and this is actually not the documentation we need. We need to find a scripting API documentation. So where you actually can learn things, which is super cool. So once you kind of understand the basic context of how everything works, you can just kind of like look up what are some of the functions that you can use to call. So instantiate things, and this is the way to like generate new things in scene. But we want to get things like a position. So this is the syntax that we're looking for. So we're gonna call instantiate the object you want to instantiate, the position of the object, and then the rotation, which will be probably just default. And inside this plant function, we're gonna call we're gonna create a game object. This is a temporary game object. We're gonna call it G equals to instantiate, and we're gonna instantiate the plant object and give it a position that will pass into this function later, and give it a default quaternion identity. That's the default. Okay. And none of the syntax is detected, but let's see if Unity is giving us any bug. I feel like I might have misspelled. Like, yeah, the quaternion does not contain a definition for identity, so maybe it's a smaller I. Please work. Oh, yes, it works. And so, yeah, so with this line itself, we kind of, I'm bothered why that, like, this is not, the text is not formatting, but oh well, about that later. With this line, you already instantiated this object, and I think that's it, right? Like, that's all we wanted. We need to plant the plan, and this is what it takes to plant the plan. But we need to find a place to call this. We need to actually find a place to know what this plant is called and what the position, where is the position. So maybe an easy thing to do is we're just gonna find like a plant placeholder. So a few more game object. I'm gonna just create all the placeholder for all the plants. So we have corn, we have lettuce, mushroom, and carrot. And I've created these placeholders here in my player controller, even though this is not, because your plants and stuff and objects should be saved somewhere, not on the player controller. But for the sake of convenience, controller we have these slots, so we're gonna just drag all the prefab that we created into these slots. So carrots into corn, into corn, lettuce into lettuce, and mushroom into mushroom. And now we have these references. We can kind of like just use one as a test. So every time our data written here, because I was using this for like recognizing the soil, and so this show data function, it's really where we can kind of like just do the same thing where like if and if we check the soil, we also like something when we click on the screen, right? You don't want to just instantiate things right when you look at the soil. That soil and things will just instantiate like crazy, and that will lag up your computer. We really want to just use this as a condition if we are looking at soil, and if there is a mouse click, then we plant at this position of the soil. So really right here we need to have some if statement, which is like our favorite statement in any program. Okay, so if hit transform get component soil sample, and this line basically means that if the stuff that we're hitting has the soil sample script, which is only soil, then we are gonna detect if we're clicking left mouse button, that means we want to plant. So left mouse button, I think it's like if input. Also, my autofill is not working. Get mouse, but left is 0. I don't know if this is the right syntax, so we need to kind of let me just Unity left mouse input. I really get mouse button up. I want to make sure if this is the right way to call it. Input.get mouse button up with 0 inside parentheses left click. That seems to be correct. So if we're pressing a button over here, we want to say like plant. Just call our plant function, and which plant we're like another layer of things, like because we need to go into the menu and select, and then once we have that selected, we can tell this, oh, now we're planting carrot, now we're planting corn. But I just want to make sure that this function works first, and so before we get into the other part, so we're just gonna plant corn for now, and we're gonna try to find the position, and the position is gonna be returned in the result of the raycast as this hit function. So in the physics function, there's an output called hit, and it's a variable called raycast hit, and then this raycast hit usually return kind of into the position of your raycast. So I think we can try to see if I can find out what the it is called. We can just do the good old Google way. So find raycast hit Unity. How do you do that? So raycast hit dot point, and hit dot rigid body, and hit. So that point is like this thing that we're looking for. And let me just double make sure. Click on the raycast hit point, and the impact point in the world space where the ray hits the collider. That seems like that's exactly the thing that we're looking for, and it's a vector 3, and our position is a vector 3. So we're just gonna do hit dot point, and this seems to be okay. So now every time through our logic one more time before we actually run. So if we're hitting someone with the soil sample script attached, and when we click button, and we're gonna call this plant function, which will instantiate a plant. The plant is gonna be this corn, and this corn is inputted right here, which is the corn that we were preparing earlier. So let me also gonna close Illustrator. Gonna close this Illustrator so that we have more memories for everything else. Illustrator eats up a lot of RAM actually. Like whenever I have it on, it's just insanely inefficient. Well, but it eats most of the RAM. So moment of truth. We'll see if the code we had worked. I really hope it does. And gonna give it here to turn on the scene. So a minute. And okay. So it has this little arrow on load, but I think it's an editor. So now we're walking around. Now we're looking at soil, and I'm gonna click. Nothing happens. Nothing happens because probably something is working, and invalidation. You're trying to read input using the engine class, but you have switched active input handle. Oh, okay. So this is probably an issue about the input.getMouse class, but this is a very like old way of doing mouse input. So this also is from developing with Unity probably 3 years ago, and in the past 3 years they have updated the input engine. You have switched the active input handling to input system package in Unity setting. So it probably means that there's a new way of handling mouse click, and I'm just gonna be lazy and do the first thing that you do. You're just gonna Google this bug and then see what comes out. So conflict between new input system and old event system, and oh god, I really hope I don't have to go into like the input configuration or this is a different issue from the one I had. You just add something like mouse. What this says, how do I fix you're trying to read input? Switch to active input. We actually do using new input system. You can access input using old input get key. That sucks. I don't want to use input not get key. Both are switch system that maybe read the arrow and switch active. So okay, so I guess because the player controller I'm using is the new input system, so I'm like looking around and inputting things. I need to find out on how to use this new input system so that I can understand how to do this. Used to be super simple interaction, and now like a lot more in depth than I thought. So and I don't really know. We only have 10 minutes left, so I don't really know if I have time to actually figure this out on live stream. Maybe after live stream. Let's see. So we have all these move, look, jump, sprint. Okay, maybe just new input system, new input system, Unity, detect mouse click. So maybe mouse clicks not detected in new input system. So maybe this will help us figuring it out. Left button. Oh god. Oh, it's okay. It's not the same issue that we have. Replace on mouse down. Yes, this might be what I want. So yeah, this person's trying to on mouse down do the same thing that I do, but then they're using like a new input with this code somewhere in your scene. Okay, so we might be getting somewhere because oh, so you need to create action as an object. Oh my god, why update? I guess it makes sense. So like this new update, you bind all your input action with an action map, and then that's why like in the old method I would just code like, oh yeah, if I detect mouse click, get things done, no problem. But in this new action, you can bind multiple input action into your menu. You can kind of say like either I detect mouse down, or I detect like a tab on a phone, or I detect like on the PlayStation controller, and then all of these do the same thing. So I think that's why they're switching to this new system, even though this is completely unnecessary for this game, but we need to figure out how to make this work. So you can add an iClickable interface, also what we want. So this code somewhere in your scene. Let me try this to see if we in 10 minutes. Let's hope we do. I'm gonna go into here and private input. So we're gonna create an input action, and we'll click sure, and then in awake equals to new input action bind mouse left button. So I'm just gonna copy paste this and also do it in awake in start. But awake is literally the calls before it even runs the game. So just put in this gets called before anything else. And this click equals to back. And also don't forget it's using this Unity input system, so you have to put this on the top so that it knows like you're referring to this library. My god, all these things. And click dot performed add equals to what x, like what? And click dot performed add equals to raycast hit, and click dot enable. What? I don't really okay. Seems like a bit then I click about interface to all game objects that wants to respond to. Your way to do should have an event system input in this on your camera, and then use eye point. Oh, this one might be a bit easy. We might be able to do this in a better way. Stop and read some of the comments. Advertisement ever for Google. I know, right? And all I know is developers love Google. Yes, someone has run into the same problem you have. Now I know why Nico has after 4 minutes. Yeah, I know it's actually quite engaging on. Usually I feel kind of anxious on live stream because I'm like, oh my god, people are expecting you to like just make shit work, and then it's not working. And then like it's actually a lot more easier if I'm just doing this by myself. I can really looking into all the documentation, but I figured it's also like a good learning process. See how like you're out, and there's no promise. Like I feel like it's like walking in the dark, you know, set a lot of creative work. What it's like dark forest, you really don't know where you're going, you don't know where it's end, but you're just gonna and see if it works. So this comment says, but it's new input system. Event system is from the Unity package, so it might not work. It's a fact on new input system. This is in fact from the input system. I usually would try a method if the comment says this. None of them says that how this works. It has to upload, so I don't really know how reliable it is. We're gonna try this first. So we are just gonna copy this person's code and see if we can make it work with our situation, even though that means we might need to change a few things. But you know, like you're just gonna keep trying until one of them works, and then eventually one of them is gonna work because people definitely have figured out this problem and way harder problems before. So we are gonna screen point to ray. This is the coordinate hit collider. Get him. So we kind of replace this. Do a debug log, which is a way. It's called debug log. It's a way for you to debug. It's working. Hitting collider. So we want the computer to log line if this is working, and binding. And physical raycast screen point to ray out, and we also want to add a condition to this ray layer screen position out hit and math f infinity and layer mask. So we want to add this to our raycast. This it's like extra condition to your raycast because we applied. This is a secret I haven't told you guys yet, but we did have applied certain. So only they are recognized, so you're actually saving memory because you don't want everything that you see. You only want to recasting certain things. Next, let's put them in layer. So we put them in this layer mask, and this layer mask is like this layer mask, and we're just gonna debug the collider and game object name. So we're gonna just debug the out if we hit collider, and we're gonna turn off this line of code because it was throwing us error. So we try something new, and let's see if it works. Oh no, not a good sign. The name game camera doesn't exist. What is game camera? Replace it with camera object, because that's my camera object. That's actually to be expected, because that's a variable that we imported. The game object does not contain definition for a screen array. Oh god. Okay, so replace this raycast to this raycast. We're just gonna replace this with the raycast we have, because we already have that. This is where we don't really need to code. And why is this giving us a bit of an error? I'm just gonna use this whole line with these codes. And I didn't do it right. Okay. Cast blah 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 blah. Okay. And debug log. Okay. Now we saved. Let's see if it compiles. Please do. Yes. Okay. It's always such a relief to see the error goes away. And now if you see if it works. Okay. Computer being slow. Okay. Now we see things. We click. It is saying hitting collider soil sample. It's working. And now all we need to do is thank you internet, give it an upload, sign in. Okay, sorry, never mind. I'm gonna go back to my script, and now we know this is actually the that we want to detect. We are gonna just copy paste our code. Paste this whole if statement. Hit transform that get component soil thing that we're clicking does have the soil sample script. We're gonna corn. Hopefully now when we click on the soil, we are gonna corn growing outside of the soil. Okay, all of that should work, and let's see if it actually works. Press play, see if it works. And okay, give it a second. Wait, it's not playing. Now it's playing. Go back and plant. Boom! We have our. Yes, I'm so happy. And now you can look at things and plant corns. My god, yes. Yeah. All the corns. Okay. We're gonna have an army of corns now. Okay. Okay, and right up. I was over ambitious again. To also do the menu and then decide on the kind of different things that we want to plan, even though I feel like that might not take that much time. But that time, and I know it's actually very draining, and also for you guys to listen to this session. We are corn. Yes, I'm very happy that we are able to solve the issue that we face. So like be able to at least make something during the live stream. And all the other stuff that I wanted to read, it will probably go stream where I will be able to be more calm and things as the natural flow. But I'm really happy to achieve what we've achieved here so far. Next step is probably, getting different plants. So and then select on different plants and then put the plants on the ground, and then we will also, this is we also need to a certain dimension so that you can't really plant right next to another plant, because that's very much against the permaculture principle. Like, what do you do? Are you trying to kill all of them? If you want, you need to give them space. It's a growing plant. So, so hopefully we'll have more of these coming together in the next few days. And for next week's session, maybe we'll do a bit of a technical dive, but because I am going to fly to Portugal in next Wednesday, so I aim to finish my session on Monday and Tuesday. So next we'll do, I think, a bit more of the conceptual design thinking about Agartha and showcase the finalized demo and the finalized kind of artistic cover render that we did. Now think about it, we actually achieved a lot in this residency, so it's really nice. I've never been so excited for corn. Me too! And this is incredibly cool. Still doesn't mean my brain isn't breaking. I'm loving this banking that I will wake up smarter tomorrow. I feel the same, honestly. Thank you, Google, and thank you, the internet, for making us feel smarter. And so with this saying, thank you all for tuning in, and thank you all of support, and thank you the Forefront family and everyone that's watching. And we'll dive more. We'll dive in a more elaborate way next week to continue to talk about this project, where it's going, what have we accomplished in 4 weeks, and also what are the next steps and how can you follow along. So with that, I'm gonna turn off my screen and then we can get the recording.